All right, so this is a chat kind of exercise. So I'm gonna ask you to kind of put some comments in the chat, and I'll see if I can read some of those. So what do you see on the screen? I think it's pretty clear that it's a styrofoam cup. So the question that I have is, what could be some uses of this cup? And please be creative. Think of something which is really extraordinary, something that nobody else would have thought about, and kind of come up with some idea as to what can you potentially use this cup for. And I'll see if I can read some of those responses. Styrofoam cup. Okay, okay, so I'm still waiting. So I think people were still answering my initial question, which was around what it was. So you can use it as a packing material. Yeah, pretty interesting. Let's see. As a flower jar. Yeah, you can. Can. What else? Let's see.
As a
How
cap?
creative that class. As a cap, yes, you can. You have to have a very small head, right? But yes, you can wear it as a cap. Halloween season is coming up,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that might be part of your costume. Arts and crafts, use it in arts and crafts. Yeah, that's good. A toy telephone for children. Yeah, yeah, you can use it as a, as an instrument, and say good the learning tool too that you can use. So yes, that's pretty good feedback. And again, the reason why I have this exercise is just to kind of give you a sense that there are so many uses that a product can be used for. And that's part of the thing, key takeaways that I'll be kind of talking about, because today's topic is product lifecycle management, which basically talks about the different cycles and stages a product kind of goes through. And one of the key messages that I have, that a same product could have several different uses throughout its lifespan. So just kind of keep that in mind as you kind of go through this session. And the other purpose that I had for this exercise was just to kind of wake people up. So hopefully people are awake. Okay. All right. So again, in the chat, I'll kind of open it up. Anything specific that you would like to learn about product lifecycle management? Are there any questions? I did try to kind of customize my session to what are some of the questions on the top of the mind of the audience. Again, if there are any that you can think of, what would you like to learn, or anything which is on your mind when it comes to product lifecycle management, what it is, what do you want to know about, any observations, anything, any particular concept that you would like to clarify today, then I can try and kind of hit that. Good tools to learn. So you want to learn about some of the tools, product lifecycle management tools. Okay. I see that. Anybody else? Anything in particular you want to learn about product lifecycle management? What it is, what it is not. So I think don't really have any other responses. So I'll kind of keep going. And if even if you kind of come up with something else as you get a little bit deeper into the topic, I'll be more than happy to kind of take that and address those questions or things that you want to cover. All right, so I've kind of put together a bit of an agenda for today. So first off, we're going to start off with product lifecycle management, what it is. So we'll just kind of introduce that concept. What does it entail? And then we get into the product lifecycle strategies. And this is something which I'm bringing from my experience in the marketing world. And I think this would be something very interesting and very valuable for this class, because on the industrial engineering side of things, these are the concepts that you don't really learn, but in the real life, this is something which really matters a lot. And so I was in my career, I was able to benefit a lot from these. And this is a pretty straightforward concept. Some of you might have already heard about those or learned about those, but it would be good for us to kind of just kind of have a quick chat about that, and then relate that to the product lifecycle management as it relates to you in the industrial engineering world or the manufacturing world. And then we'll get a little bit deeper into the new product development, because this is the exciting part. Because again, product lifecycle management, as we'll kind of appreciate in a bit, is a pretty wide ranging, I would say, process across the organization. It has different pieces to it, but the most fun part is the new product development. So, and I'm a little bit biased with that, so that's an area that I'll kind of go a little bit deeper into, and I'm pretty sure that you'll kind of enjoy that. And within the new product lifecycle, new product development, I'm going to talk about a newer concept when it comes to new product development, which is the lean concept. So I'm pretty sure that all of you would be very familiar with the lean manufacturing or lean concept when it comes to manufacturing of production, but there is a similar concept in the new product development world, which has really revolutionized how new product development processes are being managed. So I'm going to talk about that. This is something really new, which we have picked up from the technology industry, basically, but very relevant for the heavy industries and manufacturing industries as well, and a relatively newer concept. So I'm pretty sure you'll benefit from that. And then we'll kind of wrap up with some key takeaways from the session. So yeah, so these are the 5 things that we're going to be covering today. So is everybody ready to get into this? I'm going to take that silence as yes. Okay. Oh, there were a few responses too. I'll double check real quick. Yeah, yes.
Yep.
I've got the thumbs up, so we'll keep marching forward. Okay, just see. So first, product lifecycle management. All right, so time for a poll. Why is product lifecycle management important? So before we get into what this product lifecycle management is, the first question is, why do we care? Why do we want to worry about this? Why do we want to spend time studying this concept? So why is it important? So you've got the poll right in front of you. So please take a quick sec to pick the right answer or your choice, and then we'll see what the group thinks.
So we've got 16 of 31 already. So guys,
Okay,
go
so
on.
we'll give them a few more secs and see.
Yep.
And yeah, you should be able to share the results if you've got most of the people in.
Yep. So 25. Let's stop.
Okay, let's
Yes,
stop. And yeah, please go ahead. Share the
Let's
results.
share the results. So this is what
All
the
right.
results are.
All of the above. Safe bet. And again, that's the right answer. It's all of the above. So again, lifecycle management, product lifecycle management is important for several reasons, as kind of listed in that whole list. But at the bottom line, I think by managing the products, that's how organizations basically grow and make their money. Because if a company does not have a product lifecycle management strategy, over time it's going to run out of products. First, it won't be able to get the most out of its products in terms of reliability, profit, and then it won't be able to grow. So that's the reason why product lifecycle management is important. I think it's important for each and every organization, irrespective of what industry you are in, but more so for companies which are more rooted in industrial or manufacturing setup. So now that we know why product lifecycle management is important, so this is just kind of showing the same thing, that this is important because of the profitability and the growth perspective. So the next poll is, what is product lifecycle management? So let's see what the class thinks about that and see how many people can get the right answer. So A, developing new products, B, getting most out of products, C, managing products through their life cycle, life stages, D, managing products through their end of life, and last, none of the above. So let's see how many responses did you get?
23, 24. So 75%.
75%. So I think, yeah, I think we should be good to share the results.
Sure. There they are.
Managing products through their life stages. Yeah, so the majority of the class did get the answer right. This one was a little bit of a trickier question, but yeah, most of you still got it right. So congratulations. So yes, the product lifecycle management basically deals with managing the products through the different stages of its life. So from the start to the end, so cradle to the grave concept, that's what it is. So good job there. So we'll kind of get into this in a little bit more detail now. Okay. All right. So I'm a big fan of using metaphors to kind of explain concepts. So whenever I kind of teach product lifecycle management and I ask students to think about parenting, and this is what this picture is basically kind of showing, parenting. And I think there's no other concept which really kind of explains or does a better job in explaining what parenting what product lifecycle management is than parenting. Some of you may be parents, or at least have a parent for sure, right? And you can really kind of put yourself in those shoes, and then you can because what you are trying to do is basically you are parenting a product from from the inception to new product development to its its main course of its life, from introduction to your life, different life stages, your start, your mid point, and then your end of life. So it's basically taking care of all of those. And as a parent, just like a parent would do for their children, you or the organization kind of has to take care of the product through its all those stages. And not all stages are fun, right? I mean, like for example, let's just say that similar to parenting. So that's kind of my example. So now going into a little bit more of the, I would say, technical terms. So basically there are three stages, if you want to call it, in terms of, or three phases of product lifecycle management: the creation, the service, and the disposal. So creation is the very first stage. This is where idea comes about. You think about that product, you plan for it, and then you start the design process, and then the production process, and then you end up with the servicing. And this is basically your midlife, if you want to call it, because this is the product is available, it is out there, it's servicing, providing its purpose, and then basically you are servicing that product. You're making sure that that product is able to function. If it breaks down, you're able to fix it, you are able to repair it, you're able to maintain it. So all those activities fall under the service phase. And the last phase is disposal, when basically the product has done its use and now it's at the end of life. So now you have to think about how you're going to dispose that. Now, as somebody who's managing this product lifecycle management or a part of it, you need to kind of have a holistic view. So again, as an engineer, if you are on the design side of things, or you're in the manufacturing side of things, or maintenance, you have to have a full picture view of to where this product is sitting in terms of its a product lifecycle management, and what you need to do to make sure that you are getting the most out of that particular stage. And the heaviest, I would say, responsibility is on the design side, because when you are creating that product or start planning for it, and I know that's part of your course work here, you really need to kind of have an appreciation for all these different phases. And that's something that you come across a lot many times, that a design engineer designs a product but does not really take into account the servicing needs as to what kind of service challenges or issues or considerations would come into play a few years down the road once the product is in service. If you ignore those, then you're not doing yourself or the product a favor, and you'll kind of run into some issues later on. And I've been involved with a lot of products where we ran into that issue. We kind of launched it, and later on we realized that we did not have a service plan. I mean, in order to service that product, it would have cost us way more than even replacing it with a new product. Now, it was not a good strategy to begin with. So you need to kind of have that kind of a mindset from the beginning. And one thing which is becoming more and more important these days, as we are becoming more conscious as a society about the environmental impacts, is the disposal stage. And that has to be thought of upfront as to what kind of environmental impact this product would have. How can we minimize those impacts? How can we extend the life of this product? How could we have alternate uses of this product? Again, going back to the exercise that we did early on with the styrofoam cups, same concept. I mean, it's the same product, but you could use it into several other ways as well. And that's one of the things that you need to do to make sure that you're getting the most out of that product. So again, in summary, product lifecycle management is similar or the same thing as parenting, because you are kind of taking care of your babies or your products from cradle to grave. And the three broad phases are create, service, and dispose. And you need to kind of have that holistic view, especially during the design phase as you are developing that product. So you have the beginning of life, you have the midlife, and then you have the end of life. So these are three stages. And again, this slide kind of further breaks down those beginning of life, end of life, and midlife, medium life, I would say phases into some of the specific tasks or activities that fall under that. So in terms of beginning of life, you've got the production development, product planning, production, documentation. So a lot of stuff that this group is studying these days would fall under that. So a lot of work that you're doing early on. Then you have the mid of life, which is utilization, servicing, maintenance, as I talked about. So you have to kind of have those considerations. Again, you don't want to wait for those things to kind of start happening. Once you get to that stage, you need to kind of plan for those and build for those when you are designing the product in the beginning of life. So that's why you have got this circle, because all of these things are interrelated. And the end of life, as I talked about, the disposal, reuse, refurbishing, recycling, reverse logistics, so all these concepts fall under that. So how can you, and again, in an ideal world, how can you have multiple usage of the same product? Recycling, refurbishing, reuse. And I've got some good examples I'm going to share on that concept. All right. So what do you guys see on this screen? Can anybody name this machine? It's not a chat question, but I'm going to ask that anyways. If anybody want to take a crack at it, what is this machine? Sure looks nice. What do you call this machine? Let's see if somebody, oh, chat. Track how? Ho? Yes, this is one of the, yes. Track hoe. So it's called the hydraulic excavator. So hoe is another term that you kind of go with, and that's kind of commonly used. So you were right. Or excavator, the other person kind of came in as well. So you basically, and this machine could be from a small, I would say small excavator, which is just kind of working on parking lots, to really big size shovels, which are working on mine sites and filling up those big haul trucks. So yes, it's a pretty versatile machine. So I'll take this as an example to kind of walk you through the different stages that we talked about and different uses of that machine, and just to kind of put things a little bit into more perspective. So you start off with the new machine. So again, Caterpillar, which is the manufacturer of this product, manufactures this machine in this factory. In this case, this machine comes from Japan. I think as a global organization, I mean, they've got different manufacturing facilities specializing in different products. So this particular product is made in Japan. So this product is made in Japan, brand new machine. What happens next? So next is it goes into service. So during the service stage, what are you doing? You need to kind of think about what kind of parts and service and support you will have to provide, because this machine, when it's in operation, would be consuming a lot of parts and service. So you need to have that infrastructure in place, because otherwise the machine is going to break down and you won't be able to support it, or it won't be able to serve its purpose. Then after a while, the machine may need a rebuild, because if you don't rebuild the machine, the engine may be at its end of life and needs to be, reconditioned. The hydraulic system may need to be reconditioned. The tracks may be all may have lost all the traction. So you have to really kind of, in order to get another life, you need to rebuild the machine. Now, the alternate approach you can take is to have a throwaway machine, which some of the low cost manufacturers do as well. But in the case of this particular machine and Caterpillar strategy, they want to get the most out of the equipment. And that's why they build the equipment so that it can be rebuilt. And they have to kind of build all their supply chain and all their design decisions accordingly. Another option is, once you rebuild the machine, again, it gets to the end of life. You can still get some value out of it as a used machine. It may not give you the same level of productivity as a newer machine would or a reconditioned machine would, but it could still serve the purpose. So for example, if you are in a high production application where you are in, let's say you are on I would take an example, you are on a mine site, for example, it's a high production and you have got equipment operating 24/7. So for that, you would prefer new equipment. But if you have got another site, for example, a government entity, which is only maintaining roads and would need this equipment once every month if they run into some breakdown, you don't need to have a brand new machine. For those people or for those customers, they could even go by using a used machine. So that's how you need to plan for it. So again, once you get the machine at the end of its useful life for a high production application, you can still put it towards a used machine category and still get some work out of that. And once the machine has gone past that point, it could still serve as a used parts kind of source, because what you could do is you can break the machine down, take the parts out. There could be still be some parts which are in good condition, and they can serve as a spare part for some of the machines which are still in operation. So you can still get some more value out of that. And then you have got the end of life kind of consideration. So you can go into the scrap, whatever is left, because you still got metal and you can get some value out of that. So as you can see, and that scrap can also make its way back into the new machine. That's the beauty of it, because again, Caterpillar and other manufacturers too, they still use a lot of scrap in their foundries to kind of, produce their own steel, which goes into their machines. So it's a kind of big circle. So this is what product lifecycle management is. All right, so switching gears a little bit, I'll kind of would like to use the concept of the value chain to further build on the product lifecycle management, and what does it mean for an organization? What are some of the components and subcomponents? So what is a value chain in the concept of an organization? What does it mean? So I'll open up the chat and see if I can get some responses. So when you hear about value chain, what comes to mind in an organization? So think about how an organization creates value. So think about a manufacturing organization which is producing a product. How do they create that value, and how would that relate to a value chain? The benefit of product process to the organization, it includes design, service, and supply. Yeah, good. So I'll close this
There's
and
also Kemi
yes,
saying adding value to a product.
adding value to a product. Yes. So basically, think of it as, I think a really good example is an assembly line. So in an auto, all of us have seen that, right? Assembly line, and you see a product which kind of starts from scratch. You've got, the first piece that goes on that assembly line, and as the product moves through the assembly line, you keep on adding different components, different pieces to it, and in a way you are adding value to it. And then at the end of the assembly line, you have got a finished product. So now that is only the, I think that even that concept or that process only takes into account the manufacturing. You've got a lot of steps prior to that. So just like a comment earlier on in the chat, I mean, you have got the design, you have got the supply chain, you have got the manufacturing, you have got the distribution. All those are pieces of the value chain. And again, I would say an easier explanation of what the value chain is how an organization is adding value to its products and services. And I'll kind of take and the next question, what are the subcomponents? We have kind of already answered that. So I'll just kind of skip that and go to this slide. So this kind of shows, this is a good example. So you've got this value chain and it has all these different components to it. So you've got designing, manufacturing, distribution, support and maintenance, repair, when the machine is or product is in operation, and then dismissal or scrap. So you've got, this is the whole value chain. And each and every organization has some shape or form of it. And if you look at the top of this slide, it just kind of breaks down that value chain into its subcomponents. So you have the design chain, you have the manufacturing chain, you have the distribution chain. So you could also kind of look at those sub pieces of the value chain. But basically, is as the product moves through the value chain, that's how it's getting additional value added to it. And that's how the consumers or the customers are getting the value from it. And then in return, the company is making its money and it's getting its value for its efforts as well. So that's kind of the value chain. So now the question is, which of these activities fall under beginning of life, mid of life, and end of life? Again, in the value chain, if you go back to that picture, that the slide that I had, you've got all these activities. So which activities would fall under which area? I'll see if there are any responses on the chat. I think people were still kind of design and manufacturing under beginning of life. Yes. Design for sure, and manufacturing to some degree as well. Distribution, use, maintenance under mid of life. Yes, maintenance and service support would be mid of life, and dismissal is pretty obvious. Is going to be end of life. Oh, this is a pretty good dispense, recycle, and end of life. That's good. Let me just kind of show you. So these are the activities which are in the beginning of life from the whatever is left over when you are kind of dismantling or disposing or dismissing that product is the end of life. So this is how you bring back the, again, think about those three major activities or phases of the product lifecycle management, and this is how this would lay back into your value chain. Now again, you if you are the one who's kind of designing that product or are involved with design, manufacturing, or whatever aspect of this value chain, you need to have that end-to-end mindset. You need to have that whole holistic approach and perspective to make sure that everything kind of fits in. Because just think about it, if you're going to design a product without having a good strategy to service or support or end of life, that organization is going to run into a big trouble later on. So you need to really kind of have that in mind. Same goes for when you're supporting and maintaining a product, you still need to kind of consider what the end of life considerations are. And if you don't, then again, you will run into some issues later on. So again, a really good, fluid, successful product lifecycle management is end to end and takes that holistic view into perspective. All right, so now that we can appreciate why product lifecycle management is important, what it entails, we have kind of talked about that. So my question to the group is, how can organizations coordinate PLM activities? Because you've got different groups responsible for this different aspects of product lifecycle management. So how best can organizations coordinate these activities? What comes to mind? And I'll see if there are some responses to that. Because again, it's tough for you to have one person or one department taking care of the full product lifecycle management because it's an organization wide process. So you need to have some kind of a mechanism or process or a tool to coordinate all these activities across the organization. And if you need to do that, what are some of the alternatives? What are some of the options? They should find a way to measure. Okay. They need to have a measurement process in place so that they can control and they can know what's going on. Yes, like it. I like where the group is going. Any other suggestions? Think a little bit higher level at an overall perspective. What are some of the things that you could do? You've got different groups responsible for different activities, different parts of the product life cycle, and it's not a short-term process. It's a pretty longitudinal exercise. So you have to have the ability to coordinate those efforts not only within the in between the different departments of group, but over longer periods of time. So any other thoughts? Specific person each step of the process. So accountability, yes, I agree, accountability and having people accountable for those. And in some cases, I mean, organizations have product managers, and that's what they do. I mean, they're responsible for end-to-end strategy for a product. Now, do they control each and every aspect of it? They don't, but they do have an overarching kind of view of a product and the strategy, and they do kind of coordinate things between the different groups at a high level. So yeah, I like that. Okay, so let's see what I kind of had in cross-functional teams. Yeah, having cross-functional teams so that they can better coordinate and collaborate. I there's no right or wrong answer. Your company strategy, mission, and kind of match with their brand. Yeah, you got that. So a software is needed to track the product life cycle. So that was the answer that I was looking for. But again, as I said, I mean, there weren't any wrong answers. I think all these answers were correct. But what you need is you need a platform. You need a common platform which allows the different groups, different departments, and different activities to really coordinate their efforts. So that's what you need. Because as I said, I mean, this is not a process which involves different people and different growths, but also it's spread out over time. And there are different and a lot of activities happening. And I've involved with several PLM platforms, and it's not easy. New product development or product lifecycle management, because you've got so many products happening, and each product is in different life cycle stage, and different groups kind of come in and go. So it becomes really cumbersome. So you need to have a really solid foundation on which you can collaborate. So this is what it shows, that you need basically a platform. And that's where, I mean, there are different softwares available out there. I've got some of these kind of, well-known names out there. You've got SAP, Salesforce, Infor, Oracle, Autodesk. All of these big players do have their own versions of product lifecycle management softwares, and they are doing pretty good. Does anybody recognize the company that I have at the bottom right? Bombix PLM. I didn't really expect anybody to recognize. Oh, maybe somebody has a response. I'll kind of see. No, yeah, that's a response. I wasn't really expecting, but this is a very, a smaller player, not a very well-known player. But the way I kind of ran into this, because I do kind of follow a number of podcasts, and I had the CEO of this company on the call, and she was kind of telling her story as to how she kind of came about. She was basically a designer to begin with, but then she realized that there wasn't a really good PLM software out there because she was really sick and tired of doing all the management across different departments, and it was a lot of work. And she said, I need a software. What she found was that all these bigger players are way too expensive for her organization, and that's where she kind of started working on her own, and she developed this own software, which is more agile, more cost effective, and then she was able to go to market with that. But that just kind of goes on to tell you that there is such a big need of having that software, and there's such a big purpose that that software can do for you if you get it right. Because otherwise, there are so many activities that are going on, it's next to impossible to coordinate. So that's, if somebody wants to kind of go and catch up on her journey, just kind of look up this company and herself. It's a pretty interesting read. So I've got a question. So now that we appreciate that, you need some kind of a platform to collaborate your PLM activities, and these are some of the bigger players. So the question becomes, how common is a single product lifecycle management platform? So how common is it in the industry? So it's a poll question. So I'll ask Emma to kind of bring it up, um, and I'll let
Yep,
people
it's on.
kind of answer. So it's up. So please. So how common is a single product lifecycle management platform for organizations? Is it non-existence, rare, moderate, frequent, or very frequent? So let's see what the group thinks, and I'll kind of share my own perspective on this.
So guys, we're hitting a plateau at 25. Can I ask you guys to, yeah?
I think the energy level has started to come
It's
down.
slowly going down as the clock ticks, Hitisha.
Yeah, we still got some time to go
Yeah.
before the break, so I'll
Come on, guys.
appreciate
You can
people,
do it. Let's hit 30.
keeping energized.
Yeah. Okay, 27. I
Okay,
think let's
so
stop
let's see.
at that.
Okay, so let's see.
Yep.
Okay, so non-existent, rare, moderate, frequent, and very frequent. So Ahmed, what would be your pick? I know you've got a pretty strong opinion about this, so
Well,
I'd love to
I think that a single PLM would be non-existent. That's what I would think. I didn't
non-existent.
vote, but maybe I'm wrong. I look forward to you talking about it.
Yeah, I think I would either put it under rare. I think non-existent would be, there might be some companies. I'm yet to kind of come and see that or come across a company. But I would say it's rare. There
Yep.
are some, some really good organization, especially if you are small. I think you could go by that if you're not
Yep.
as
I
big.
didn't know about this PLM company that you just talked about, right? The Bombex PLM. Never heard about them until today.
Yeah, it's a pretty small company. It's a pretty neat kind of a story that they got. So I would encourage people to just kind of read up on that. And they've got a pretty nice model which they have used to challenge the bigger players in terms, because their model is modular, their software is pretty cost effective. So yeah, they are making some good headway there. But again, I think it's really rare. at very least. I think frequent, yeah, because it's a tough one. Because think about it, product lifecycle management just touches everything. So can you
Yep.
really have a system which kind of touches all your aspects? I think it would be really rare if you run into that. Now, you could have companies which have 70 or 80% of their processes kind of collaborated through some kind of a PLM software, and that would be best in class, I would think. Now, having said that, that does not mean that you should not aspire for that. And that's the reason why I kind of brought it up, because it's really important for especially young professionals as you kind of go into the industry. I think that's a really fertile ground for you to kind of challenge as you kind of go in. And if you're involved with the product lifecycle management, the first question you ask is, hey, how are we collaborating our efforts? What are we doing? And what can we do differently? And maybe you cannot go for a single platform, but maybe you can develop something in-house. I've kind of seen organizations making huge headways by just having a SharePoint website to collaborate their PLM activities. Because prior to that, they did not have anything and people were just doing their own thing. So this is an area where you can really make a big difference. First, by kind of developing or improving the PLM platform that the organization is using, or even if you become a part of that, how best you leverage that, because not everybody uses that platform. So if you're lucky enough to work for an organization which has a really solid PLM uh, platform, just having that appreciation and making sure that you're using the most of it would make a huge difference, not only for your own success, but for the success of the organization. So really would encourage you to kind of explore that and keep that advice in mind as you go into your professional careers. All right. So product life cycle strategy. So this is where, as I mentioned earlier, this is a concept which I've kind of brought in from the marketing side of things. So this is a concept which I was exposed to when I was doing MBA. Again, it's not a rocket science, pretty straightforward. Uh, some of you would have already kind of heard about it or known about it. But what I find really valuable is that this concept gives you a really different perspective as to how your product is doing in the marketing side of things. Because at the end of the day, marketing kind of derives your product success, if I would say. Because again, manufacturing and marketing, I think they both go hand in hand for sure. But marketing has a bit of an edge because marketing is a little bit closer to the customers and the market. And that's why they are kind of feeding that information back to production and manufacturing and design. Hey, this is what our customers are asking for. These are the challenges. So again, you need to kind of go hand in hand. And that's why I have found that engineers can really kind of benefit from this marketing perspective, because as you become part of those cross-functional teams, you're kind of working on those new product projects or even mid of life product projects. I mean, if you have a good appreciation of what the marketing perspective is, what the product life cycle strategies are, which marketing dictates, you will have a much, I would say, a very different approach to how you design and manufacture. And we'll kind of get into that um, really quickly. So, Chad, what are product life cycle strategies? So, anybody who has kind of read that concept or heard about it, put in a comment in the chat, and hopefully that will kind of wake some people up. So what are the product lifecycle strategies, or what are the product lifecycle stages from a marketing side of things? Anybody taking a marketing course? I'm pretty sure this would have come up. If not, maybe this is something that you have kind of just heard or read somewhere. Anybody? Just give it a quick sec if somebody comes up. So yeah, got a response. I'll see what that is. To develop new product before the current product reach its peak in sales. Yeah. So you have a product strategy where, before one of your product kind of starts declining, you develop another product. Introduction, growth, maturity. Yes, those are the stages. So you are spot on in terms of your marketing. These are the product lifecycle stages. And decline. Value the product and its customer base. Yeah. So let me kind of get into that real quick. What happened here? All right. So these are the stages from a marketing perspective. So again, just to kind of explain this graph. So on the y-axis, you have got the sales or profit. So these are dollars. And on the x-axis, you have got the time frame. So initially, when you can, let's kind of just kind of look at the green, which is your sales. So this is your product life cycle. So you have the introduction phase where you introduce and launch a new product. So in this stage, obviously, I mean, you don't have that much of a market share. You just start to kind of get the product out. So that's the introduction stage. Next is the growth stage. And this is where the market starts to accept that product, and then your market share and your sales start to grow. So this is the growth stage. So you're kind of entering into the growth stage, and then you get into the maturity where it becomes a mature market. So your growth kind of flattens. So you're not really kind of growing that market. You got a market share, you got a set market, and you're just kind of supporting those customers. And that product kind of is in that maturity stage. And then it gets into the last stage, which is decline, where your market share or your sales start kind of declining. So I'll just kind of take one example. So for example, if you want to take an example of say an iPhone, you get a new iPhone launched, new model, iPhone 10, 11, whatever, whichever, I've kind of lost track, but whichever is the latest model, think of that. Let's say iPhone 10. So it got launched a few years ago. So in the introductory stage, obviously the sales wouldn't have really kind of peaked right away. So once you launch it, people, the awareness goes up, your supply chain comes online, people start using it, there are good reviews, and then you're still starting to grow. And that's where you kind of start hitting that growth stage. Now, after a while, your growth stifles because your competition, Samsung kind of comes up with a Galaxy, which is close to yours, a little bit cheaper. You've got other alternatives for that model comes up, and that's where you kind of hit that maturity stage. Now you're kind of mature, and you're not really growing your sales. It kind of stifles, and then ultimately your sales starting to go down because competition comes up with a new product, or customers are looking for something different, and sometimes you try to kind of create something on your own too, which is going to replace your own product because you're trying to kind of beat that decline. So you kind of, maybe iPhone kind of launches a new product, and that kind of starts kind of cannibalizing some of your sales, and this iPhone 10 starts kind of going down. So that's how the different product life cycle stages work when you are looking at it from a marketing perspective. You have the introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. I'll just kind of have a quick look because there seems to be a bit of a comment on the chat. How about pre-order? So I'll take a crack at that question. So you're thinking pre-order. So yeah, so again, iPhone, in case of iPhone, because they have such a strong brand, I think for them, the introduction phase may be really short, or maybe it's not even there. Because again, if they already got too many orders upfront, that okay, day one sales, they'd already expect this day one sales is going to be $1 million, and it's gonna from $1 million it's going to be 1.2, 1.3. It's going to be growing all the way through. So then they may not even have a introduction state. Maybe it's just a small blip, and they can jump into growth. But that's more of an abnormality than the reality, right? Because each and every, if it's a new product, it is going to take a little bit of time to be in the introduction stage. As the awareness goes up, as people understand that product, they try it. You have the early adopters, and then the words start getting out, and then you get um, into the growth stage.
So Ihtisham, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is very interesting, and I was exactly, I was wondering about this question that Abdul Wahab just wrote in the chat, and I was actually thinking about iPhone as well, right? That so a really established brand, and has been around for years, and then they pre-market it through those, Apple, whatever their tech days are when they describe and the pre-orders are done. But on the other end of the spectrum, I want to get your input about products that are really built as a function of demand, and I don't know how to put it in really in the exact jargon, but I can give you an example. So for example, like SpaceX's programs that were funded by NASA, or very large scale infrastructure, or really large scale products that are sometimes even designed as a function of government's undertaking or some really big backing. Can you talk a little bit about that spectrum as well of
Yeah,
the
for sure.
products?
So I think, yeah, so those are really, I would say, unique kind of a cycle, right? Because again, you've got a special project where you've got one customer and who wants that special product and willing to kind of pay the price. And it's kind of customized product which is developed for that one particular customer. So it could be more in the product development stage, I would say, because again, I mean, at that time it's more of a test product and you've got one customers. But again, going back to this SpaceX example, if that kind of gets off the ground and it becomes more of a commercial offering, then you may enter into a more of a traditional life cycle where you would have an introduction, you've got the growth, maturity, and something like that. So I think that's a little bit of a differentiation that I would put. Uh,
Yep, and I agree because that's what we're sort of looking at into the space race, the new space race. So if we look at the space race as well, there were two basic phases that we can divide the space race. So one was space race that was backed by the governmental initiatives, that was more a matter of national security, more a matter of pride and achievement on a national level, that led to the Russian and US space race of what we've seen in 60s and 50s, 60s and 70s. And then obviously we're now looking at a different era now. And I really agree with what you said, that although the need for having a private enterprise for space transport has been spurned in part by NASA's change in policy to stop shuttling the people, but this has become an industry of sorts, as you yourself have
yeah.
mentioned, that now SpaceX is not the only player. There are a bunch of organizations vying for piece of the market. So yeah, I think what you've mentioned is really right, that over a period of time it tends to evolve.
Yeah. So again, I would kind of put them under the product development stage at this point, and then ultimately once they become closer to the, I would say, the commercialization, that's where they're gonna have that introduction, growth, and all those phases that they'll kind of go through. A good example there and good comments. I'll just kind of see because there's another comment there. Can growth and maturity overlap, or are they always discrete? So again, I think there could be opportunities where they kind of overlap. Just gonna give me a sec here. So there may be opportunities where, again, the curve may not be exactly the same, right? It could be a little bit more flatter. So from you've got a slower growth, and then all of a sudden you got, the growth phase is really short, and then you go into the maturity. So you could have that. Again, some of that could be a factor of the industry that you are in, or some of it could be factor of what you're doing to your own product, like Apple does, right? I mean, iPhone, they kind of launch an iPhone and they kind of really make it obsolete themselves by creating another product which is far superior and really kind of appealing, and that's how they kind of beat this product life cycle trap, right? Because before their product kind of start dropping, they kind of kill it on their own, cannibalize it through another product, and try to kind of get another life out of it.
Exactly. And it's Sham, I just want to ask you to elaborate a little more, because this is a new trend that we see. And so a couple of years ago, there was this class action suite, and then there was this request of disclosure of the information, and Apple finally admitted that it was slowing down the phones after 2
iOS,
years.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And it just shows the very complex and intricate nature of not only of the product lifecycle management, because I look at it as a product lifecycle management thing, that they don't want the lifecycle or the performance or the perceived performance of a product to decrease after a certain time, so that the customer now has the incentive of going out and buying the new product.
And I think that can raises some really interesting ethical questions, right? I think that's another thing that I'm really kind of passionate about, that I'm all about marketing and making sure that we are, innovating, and we are, increasing and growing our sales and market share, but you need to do it ethically. And that's really important. Otherwise, at some point it's going to, come back to haunt you, just like in case of Apple, right? So I think that's really important, that even though you try and kind of beat this life cycle so that you're getting the most out of it, but you still want to do it ethically. But at the same time, and that's what defines what your processes are. Because again, another way to look at it, so in that case, I mean, they were really kind of slowing down the iOS or their phone. But let's say if you choose to invest less in your phone or technology, you say, you know what, I'm going to create a machine, or but I won't really spend too much on the quality, because after 2 3 years it's just going to start breaking apart. Or but I'm going to make it cheap so that it's really kind of cheap and everybody can afford it. But I'm going to just kind of place it really quickly. So that could be a strategy, and there's nothing wrong with that. In the industrial world, I do see there are a lot of, even in the construction equipment business, there are a lot of companies whose mantra is you just get one life out of it. You got a brand new machine, you just get one life, and you just send it to scrap. That's their value proposition. That's their strategy. Now, Other manufacturers may have a different strategy, and that's what defines their design process and manufacturing, because they want to get more life out of it. So I think those are the type of choices that you have to make, but you have to be ethically responsible. I think that's something really important to appreciate. Okay, so I'll just kind of relate it back. Okay, so it's good to know this concept, but how does it impact me as an industrial engineer or designer or manufacturing engineer? How does this impact us? So if you are supporting a product which is in the introduction state, which is new, brand new, so what are you trying to do as a product lifecycle manager? You're trying to maintain a basic product because you don't have as big of a demand yet. You're not so what you're trying to do is just to kind of maintain, because as you can see, the profit line, you are not making money, you are losing money. So again, you need to kind of have that kind of a balance, because as an engineer, we do have that tendency to kind of, make the product better, put in all the features, right? And make it the best product possible. But there are times where you have to really kind of look at the commercial viability of what does it mean. So that's why it's really important to appreciate, if a product is at an introductory stage, your challenge at that point is just to kind of create that awareness and that adaptability of that product. So you're not really competing with a lot of competition. You're not trying to kind of really do something crazy. You don't need to, because you just need to have this product which serves its purpose and proves itself, and then starts growing. Once it starts growing, then you can start doing something different. So again, that's what happens. So once you get into the growth stage, that's where you need to kind of start adding features and quality, because now the customers are going to start questioning, hey, yes, it does meet the basic purpose, but it breaks down, or it's not lasting as long, or it's not as user friendly. And competition also starts kind of jumping in at this point, because now it's a growing market, so other people are going to start coming in too. So you need to differentiate. So again, as a designer, as an engineer, you need to kind of think about, hey, if I'm in the growth stage, what kind of features can I add, or what kind of quality that I can build into this to kind of help us differentiate and continue to grow our sales. So that's kind of one consideration. And then you get into the maturity stage. This is where your growth is plateauing. You've got a lot of competition, or the growth has stifled. You've got alternate products which has come into the marketplace, or it could be a, like, for example, I'll give you an example, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's say diesel engine technology, now it is on the decline. It's not growing anymore. It's being replaced by electric technology. So if I'm a design engineer for diesel engines, I better not spend too much time on improving that engine design. I'll rather kind of spend that time and energy on electrification. That's one of the questions that has been facing Cummins, that company that I'm working for, and they have made this choice to kind of spend more money, innovation dollars, on electric technology and hydrogen cells rather than diesel technology. So those are decisions that you need to make. So find new uses. So you try and kind of find new uses of your product, so that you are able to get more out of that life cycle, and you are able to maintain that curve. And the last, reduce cost and defeature. And this is the hardest. And I've kind of come across this situation a lot many times as I was working with product groups and manufacturing teams, because once you hit a point where the product is declining, it's really tough to let go. But at that time, what you need to do is to reduce cost and defeature, because you've got your customer base is reducing, so you cannot continue to pump in new features and new technologies into it. But it's just not worth it from a commercial perspective. Does not make sense. You may want to take all those funds and all those efforts and put them towards other products or newer products that you're running into. So are there any questions or comments on that? I already kind of talked about this diesel engine example. So that's what that was all about, where I was talking about, hey, as a company like Cummins, I mean, instead of investing in diesel engines, now you need to invest in other technologies. So that's a question that you got. And even if you are a diesel engine product manager, or you're managing diesel engine manufacturer, you still need to kind of see which stage your product is in, because again, this life cycle concept is across product lines, it across models. So for example, if you are talking about iPhone, for example, so iPhone 10 would be in a different spot in this curve, and iPhone as a whole, as a category, would be in a different um, stage in this curve. So you need to kind of look at both and see what that does that mean to you from a product lifecycle management decisions, and then you adjust those decisions accordingly across your manufacturing, across your design, your quality control, all those processes. So for example, if a product is on the decline, you're not going to make a new manufacturing facility. You're not going to invest in the new technology to improve the manufacturing. You'll try and kind of make do of what you got without any making any more investments. Okay, so time for a breakout session. So I'll walk everybody through this, and then I'll ask Ahmed to kind of break everybody into a breakout session. So we'll have 10 minutes for that. And maybe Ahmed, what we could do is we could have a do you want to have a break right after? Do we do a debrief first and then break, or you think we should do the debrief after the break?
Yeah, I think let's give them a break, and then that's going to freshen them up a little bit as well. And once they come back, they can do the session. But I leave that up
Okay.
to you.
So what I'll do is I'll just kind of introduce this so that as you kind of go into the break, just kind of think about it, and then we can maybe the breakout session could be shorter as you kind of come back, and then we can do this. So again, I've got this scenario here. So you're a design engineer for electric cars at a leading auto manufacturer, and the chief engineer has asked you for following input for the next model. So they are developing the next model of the electric car. So what are some of the critical beginning of life, medium of life, and end of life consideration that would impact design criteria? So what are some of the things that you want to consider in your design? And what are the product lifecycle strategies that should be included in design criteria? So again, this is in growth stage. So just kind of think about if you got a product which is growing, so what do you need to do? So it's not in introductory stage, it's in growth stage now. So think about what we talked about on the last slide in terms of what we should be doing. And then what are some of 2 or 3 design criteria highlights that you would like to include, based on the above. So based on those BOL, MOL, and EOL, and the PLC strategy, what are some of the design criteria highlights? So in terms of, you can talk about, materials, in terms of technology, in terms of anything to do with the design. So again, without going into too much detail, just gonna pick up 2 or 3 design criteria that you would pick up from those earlier considerations. So with that, we'll kind of break for 10 minutes, Ahmed. So we are at 5 or 6 or 8.
So
So
let's say 6:20.
6:20. And then when you come back, we'll kind of set up the breakout session right away. And then or maybe what we should do is instead of breakout session, maybe we'll just kind of have a chat discussion. I think let's do it that way. When people come back, we could just have a chat discussion and we'll save a little bit of time.
So let's do this way, Ra. Let's really give them a break, Etesham. So let's give them a break until 6:20, and
Yes.
once they come back, let's give them 5 to 10 minutes for
Yeah, for sure.
chatting, and then we can
Yeah,
so
I
the
agree.
because I understand that some of the students are in very different time zones.
Okay,
So
that's fair. So thanks for that clarification. So yeah, we're gonna break for 10 minutes and we'll just kind of resume right where we are leaving. So we'll kind
yep.
of be at this slide and we'll kind of talk through this and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yep. So guys, until 6:20, we are on a break. I am sticking around here. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I will pause the recording in these 10 minutes of the break. So once you guys come back, remind me again and I'll start the recording again. Okay. Go ahead,
Awesome.
guys.
Bit different in terms of with as compared to traditional products, but at the same time, the overall, I would say, the product life cycle will still apply. So I don't know if you have a particular services in mind. If you do, then I can maybe use that as an example and explain it
So I
better.
have
But
two
at a high
examples.
level, yes, go ahead.
So the one example would be the insurance companies. They have the healthcare dental packages for us. But what I've noticed is that every year they'll customize it based on whatever profitability, if they made any or not. So should I suggest that it's a different product lifecycle for each insurance policy, or is it more of an iterative thing they are doing in terms of their services to sustain their services rather?
So I think it's a combination because insurance is a tough, kind of product or service. But at the same time, I think what they're doing is they're kind of just refreshing, like you would do, like even if you talk about auto manufacturer, every year they refresh their model, right? They will kind of change the lights design or include some feature here or there. And that's exactly what the insurance companies are doing too, to kind of keeping themselves relevant, and at the same time also sustaining themselves. Because again, based on the last year's data, if they got certain areas where the costs were higher or claims were more than what they had anticipated, so they want to make those tweaks, similar to what an car company would want to do, right? So for example, all of a sudden, if their input costs go up, I know, for example, in Canada, we import, a lot of raw materials, let's say, or come from US. If that's the case, an automobile, I mean, their input cost is going to go up. So they want to update that cost every year. So in that aspect, I would say it's very similar when it comes to insurance, because what they're trying to do is keep relevant and updating and refreshing their cost and their features.
I think I want to add, Itasham, to that I agree with you that insurance is a very different kind of a beast, because when things tend to be supported through regulatory measures, it becomes a different market, Ali. So insurance, I think, as an example, if you talk about insurance, it wouldn't be very applicable to an open market competition, because insurances mostly are regulated. People don't buy insurance because they like to buy insurance. People buy insurance because they are regulated, they're required to do so. Now, if you look at something that is much more in the private sphere and within the choice of consumer and customer, let's take the example of mobile communication services, right? So I think what Itisham was saying, Ali, I would tend to agree to that I think on a higher level, it does follow the same pattern, because think about the standards like, so 4G. So 4G is a very mature technology, and companies have made their investment into 4G technology, and they can continue, they can choose not to innovate. Now that service now offering has the potential of 5G, right? So it is a company's decision in the strategic planning really to see if they want to go towards 5G or stay on 4G. Now, if they do not innovate, and if they do not change their offering by providing, and remember we talked that service always has this hardware component, right? A service needs some sort of an enabling devices. So 5G technology and the hardware is the enabling devices. So if a company does not choose to go to 5G, eventually they will start losing out. So my opinion is that, and if you look into that sector, so Bell and other companies have already started to even implement those technologies. So service offering needs to be constantly innovated, and they follow a introduction, take up, maturity, and phase out cycle as well. Now, what kind of a curve that is something that could be different for one service to another, and that is something I think in which services may differ slightly, because delivering a service is not the same as delivering a product. Does that answer your question, Ali?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yep. So Itisham, I guess let's restart.
Yeah, for sure. So where we left it last time before the break was we were going through this kind of exercise. So what I'm thinking of doing is that we should still do the breakout session so that people have a little bit of time to talk through. I think they have we already introduced that. So let's give them, I don't know, Ahmed, what do you think?
For
10
sure, for
minutes?
sure. Let's go for it. Yeah.
So let's go for that. So we'll give everybody about 8 minutes, I would say, because it's going to take a couple of minutes for everybody to get back. So let's target for 8 minutes. So we'll kind of split the class into groups of 5 or 6 students each, and just kind of talk about this kind of scenario, which is on your screen and has also been uploaded on the docs. I think Ahmed has also shared that, right, in PDF.
Yep. So guys, all the documents what you're seeing are available on eClass. In case you haven't downloaded them, you can go onto the eClass, and this exercise that Itisham has shared, this is also available separately on your eClass under the lecture. So you can go and download that. And with that, I have created the rooms, and I have opened those rooms. So please go ahead and join them.
an end of life for a product that is an electric car, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think I personally, and I'm just giving my view on this, and I would feel that something like an electric car has a lot to do with like the environment. So the design consideration has to have like a very specific impact on the environment. Also, the product in itself cannot survive. Will need more support from, say, for example, charging stations and stuff like
Yep.
that. So that when someone would be discussing it, it would also impact in design. The other thing that I thought of as this thing came up was also marketing, because how you're pitching the product to to the customers is also going to be important on why they should be saving the earth.
Okay, Itisham.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone. After the breakout exercise, I was part of one group, did kind of jump out a little bit earlier, but there was some interesting conversation happening there. So I'll just kind of walk through these questions and maybe we'll have some feedback. So please, use the chat feature if somebody wants to speak from that group, then I would love to kind of hear. Again, in terms of the first question, what are some of the critical beginning of life or medium life or middle of life or end of life consideration that the groups talked about? Any, maybe give me a few on the chat.
Yep,
Wrote
guys,
some.
feel free to unmute yourself and or write in the chat, however you feel more comfortable.
Let's see what happened here. Okay. Battery disposal, yes. End of life battery disposal is a big one. Battery selection, beginning of life, yes. Battery is a big, because again, from a life perspective too, right? Because I think that's one of the key pieces, even from a growth perspective, I think, and just from a service perspective, right? I mean, what kind of battery do you want? How long a service life? How long does it keep charged? And then the charging stations, I think that's a key considerations too, right? To make that work. So that would be, and what kind of charging stations are available, what kind of charging stations are becoming available, where the technology is headed, so that you can make those decisions accordingly. So very well. What are some of the PLC strategies that should be included in the design criteria, assuming that you are in the growth stage? So what could be some of the PLC strategies or product life cycle? Remember, we talked about, yes, battery performance is one. Uh, how can you add features and improve the quality? So I think battery performance would be the key, right? And then how can you reduce the charge time and extend the charging duration? I think that would be a critical piece. And that's what the industry is doing now, right? I mean, Tesla has been fairly successful with its model up until now, but now that they are in the growth stage, now you need to kind of think about how you kind of improve the quality and performance, engine performance. Yeah, so you got all those considerations. So what would be a couple of design criteria highlights based on above? What are some of the design criteria that you would jot down and make sure that your design engineer consider as they start designing this new model of electric car? Self-driving. Yeah, that's another technology which is becoming more and more common. So you may want to consider that.
What about range, Itisham?
Sorry, you said range, the
Yeah,
driving range?
the
Yeah,
driving range, yeah.
I think that's key. And I would kind of, that would be, again, I would say medium of life or mid of life, I would say, because again, you really want to make sure that it is performing right. I mean, it's a big consideration from the customer's perspective. So I fully agree. So yeah, so those are all valid considerations. In the group that I was part of, end of life, there was a lot of discussion about how do we make sure that you are environmentally friendly in terms of your end of life strategy. So the materials that you select, you want to have as little plastics as possible, for example, so that you're able to degrade, or you're able to recycle, you're able to reuse, because electric car is all about saving the environment, right? So how can you tie it in with your end of life as well? I would say similar considerations for battery disposal, right? I mean, you've got some really toxic stuff in those batteries. So how do you extend the life, and then how do you build them in a sustainable way and less or least impact to the environment? So good discussion. Thanks everybody for participating, and I hope everybody got some good value out of that and was able to apply the concepts that we learned. So we'll kind of move forward to the next section, which is on the new product development. So we're going to start with a poll. So what percentage of new products fail? So I'll let Ahmed kind of put that poll in front of everybody, and let's see what the
Yep,
group
it's
thinks.
on.
And hopefully everybody has energized after the break, and we would have.
Let's look at the rate of completion of this poll as a indicator of the rate of energizing of the class.
And how quickly, right? How quickly people
Yeah.
we hit the 70, 75, or 80%
Guys,
completion.
let's bring it to 75 as soon as we can. Come on, let's see how
Let's
much
see.
coffee is helping you guys.
Okay. Let's see what the results are. So where did you hit?
65%.
65. The coffee wasn't.
The
Coffee
coffee
did
not
not do.
strong enough. Nope.
Yeah,
It's
it
not
wasn't. Didn't
strong
do good.
coffee.
I think the coffee designer has to kind of change their strategies, right?
They
They
need
need
to
to.
increase the percentage of caffeine in it.
Yes, they need to. Okay, so let's see what the results are.
Okay, let's. So we've got 68%. That's 71. Guys, one more, and then it's probably going to be 75%. One of you who has not done the poll, can you go on and
Do the poll. Okay.
Oh yeah, there we go.
What percentage of new products fail?
We got
Come to this.
75%. So let's
Okay.
share the
Well, thanks for
results.
that, and let's see what there is. 31 to 50%, 71 to 90%, greater than 90%. So yeah, 50%. I think about 46% said 31 to 50%. So again, there are, I would say, different results. So this was a tough one, right? I mean,
I
but
think
I've
our
got.
class is very optimistic, Tisham, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, but at the same time, it's not as far off too. So I'll just kind of show you some results that I was able to find. So
Yep.
the common belief is it's as high as 90% of new products fail. So this is the common belief. But again, I have to kind of back it up with some kind of a scientific proof. So I've got this study that I'm citing. They found that it was about 35 to 50%.
That's great.
So it's less because again, they had a certain criteria that they used, but it's a pretty high percentage. If you think about it, even if it's 50%, I mean, 50% of new products fail. So that's a pretty big rate. And think about all the money and effort and time spent into those products that never see the light of the day. So it's a huge cost. So the new product, and again, it is very exciting part of the business that you want to be part of, right? As an engineer, as a designer, as a professional, because again, you're talking about new products, you're talking about the futuristic products, new markets. So it's really exciting. But the reality is, most of these products do fail. And it's really costly.
So we've got a question there, Hisham, from Ning, who's asking, what do you call a fail? So how do we define failure? And she says, no product end up getting produced or not making. So product not getting produced or not making money. So can you talk a little bit about that? What is a failure?
So failure, and again, I have to kind of look into the study. It's been a while since I read that as to what the specific definition for failure was. But as far as I recall, the failure was if the product does not survive after a certain period. So they can launch a product, let's say it was a 1 year or 2 year period, and there was no product after that. I mean, it was just out of the market. So that's how they kind of defined the new product failed, because if there is no market, then the product is failure. So that's how they define that. So good question there. So yeah, it's a very high percentage, and it's a very costly business. It's a very important element of any company or organization, because that's how you grow. If you don't have new products, you're not able to grow. You're going to die over time, right? But at the same time, it's a very costly proposition because high percentage of these new products do fail, and it's not cheap. So we'll talk about the new product development process a little bit, what the traditional process is, and then we'll get into the lean new product development cycle, which is something new that we have been introduced to, and now it's becoming more and more common in new product development, even in the traditional industries. So I'll kind of speak to that. All right, so this is the traditional linear, I would call it, the new product development process. So from, you got the opportunity, the idea generation, screening, evaluation, business analysis, you develop the product, do the testing, and then you commercialize. So very linear process, as you can see. One step leads to the next. And this kind of takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of, I would say, dollars to kind of build a product. But again, we did kind of appreciate in the last slide, most of the products do kind of fail. So this is not a great strategy or process to follow because it's kind of linear, right? You're not learning from one step to the other, and you are putting too much stuff at risk. um, the other piece to kind of understand when it comes to new products, there are different types of new products, right? So there are new products which are new to the world. So, for example, we were talking about SpaceX. So, I think at some point that was a brand new product. I mean, nobody else had anything even close. So, that's a new to the world product. At the same time, the latest model of iPhone is also a new product, but it's just a newer model of an existing product. It's not a new product. But at some point, when the first iPhone was born, maybe that was a new to the world market product, right, with the touch screen. So, yeah, so there are different types of new products, and they kind of, and that's where they have a different level of complexity. So if you can see on this, you have got new product lines which are just extensions. So you got existing product line, you just kind of add to it, whereas you kind of really redefine a product. So that's the core product revision. You are really defining or refining or rebuilding of an existing product. You are just kind of rebranding or bringing some really new features into that. So again, going back to the question around insurance, so if you're really gonna revitalizing your insurance policy, in the past you can offer, pretty straightforward, hey, this is what you get in terms of insurance coverage, this is the lifespan. But all of a sudden, if you've got too many options, and you've got at the base, you've got a very different assumption as to how that premium is calculated or awarded, then you have got a very different product. So that's a different level of complexity that you're going through. So yeah, so you have got different types of products. So you've got repositioning, which is essentially the same product. You're just trying to kind of find a different use and putting it towards a new market. So you're not making too many changes to the product. I've been involved with some projects too in a market. Marketing is a funny word. You'll receive a part from the same company in two different packaging. One would be priced higher than the other because it's just a different packaging. And there might be a little bit of a difference here and there. And sometimes there is no difference. It's the same supplier that the part is coming from, but one has a different branding on it, different packages, targeted towards a different market, and the other one is a different. I've got an example. Even in the Cummins world, we have got what we call some engine parts that go into mining equipment, which we call high horsepower, really big engines, and same parts go on a commercial truck engine. It's the same part, packaging is different, customer base is different, pricing is different. So again, you may kind of reposition some of those two. So again, the new products, again, the concept I wanted to clarify was it kind of varies in terms of complexity. If you're talking about a brand new product, which is really the first time the world is going to see it, obviously it's going to be really complex and it will take a lot of effort. So what are some of the downsides of the traditional new product development process? So this is the poll, and I did kind of give it away a little bit too as I was introducing the new product development, the linear process. But I'll see how people can how people answer to this poll, uh, which Ahmed is bringing up. So what are some of the downsides of the traditional new, which is the linear process that I showed you? High risk, high cost, long lead times, low flexibility, slow learning. What are the downsides? Let's see what people have to say. And I'll be happy if I had 70% this time, because I know as we continue to go um, down the evening, the energy level continues to go down.
Yeah, but I think around 7:30 the energy level starts spiking up again. I don't know
Okay.
I don't know what's the reason, Hisham. Maybe it's the proximity of the end in sight.
and the end sight, right? Or maybe we should just kind of move the class timing, and that would
Yeah.
help. No,
Okay, this time we went to 75% quite
okay,
quickly.
that's pretty good.
Let's share the results.
Okay. So high risk, high cost, long lead times, low flexibility, slow learning. Yeah, so it's kind of across the board. And the real answer is all of the above. I should have kind of included that, but I did not because I don't want to keep a little bit more engaging. So yeah, it's basically all of these. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, in the linear process, you're not learning, you're kind of waiting, you're moving from one step to the other without really learning, and you're taking too high a risk. And just think about it. You kind of develop a product based on certain assumptions, and by the time you launch it, if your assumptions were not correct or they changed drastically, then all your investment in that product development is going to go to waste. All that time and energy that you're going to put in is going to be of no use. So that's the biggest kind of downside of a traditional process, that it's a very slow, tedious, and long-term process. You're taking high risk and it costs you a lot of money. So what's the way out? What do you do? How do you get out of that? That's the question. But before that, I'll kind of share one example from my personal life. Has anybody seen this picture or a variant of this? Can anybody make a guess as to what this equipment is and where it is being operated? Very close to home, I would say, for you folks. So mines, yes, mine truck. Fort McMurray, yes, spot on. So these are your mining trucks. These are the largest mining trucks. I think they carry about, oh, sorry, let me just kind of see. So they carry about 400 tons of oil sands in this case, which you're seeing, and they kind of transport it from the mine, open pit mine, to the process plant where you kind of basically extract bitumen from the sand. So yeah, so that's kind of the operation. So I was involved with a very neat project. Again, as you know, all these mines, especially in the Fort McMurray, they are under the gun for their impact on the environment, especially on the emission side, right? I mean, they are very emission heavy, and these trucks also contribute to that. So these trucks had tier 2 engines with a higher emission. And basically the customer request was that, hey, can you guys come up with a tier 4 engine so that we can reduce our emission? Now think about it. You have got 50 of these trucks operating at one side, and it's a pretty big engine, like I think 3,000 horse. So it's a pretty, yeah, so pretty big impact. So they say, hey, we are under the gun. We would like to do that. That would kind of give us fuel efficiency. That's going to do this, environmental impact. Can you come up with that? Our product team says, yes, we can work on it. So we took it away. Took us I would say 6 months to 12 months to kind of develop a prototype. We got that prototype back in, put into one of the trucks. We ran it for about, I think, 1.5 years, and then got the data back. And then we had a commercial solution available. And I was tasked with, hey, you've got the solution, take it to the market, talk to the customers and sell it. They should be buying it off the shelf because they asked for it. Now I went and engaged the customers and they said, okay, yeah, we are glad that you came up with this solution for us. How much does it cost? And I said, okay, it costs about $2 million. They said, okay, thank you for this information. And yeah, we'll let you know if you're interested. End of conversation. And you didn't hear back. So again, that I kind of took that feedback to the engineers and they were like really upset that, hey, you kind of asked us to spend all this money on this solution, right? And the customer does not want it. What's going on? So anyways, went back to the customer, had some conversation. They said, yes, I mean, there's something that we wanted, but at the same time, we have to be cost efficient too, right? I mean, at the time when we started this conversation, we didn't anticipate that's going to cost this high. And then now the things have changed. Now we have to be really cost conscious as well at the same time. So this solution is just not going to work. Plus, there are concerns about reliability, having a mixed fleet, how we're going to support on the parts side. And so it was a big undertaking for them. So they didn't see the value. So it took us about 6 months to really kind of backtrack and kind of customize a solution to meet their customers' needs, and we were still able to sell it. But again, that was a shocker, and that's a classic example of where you kind of develop that product in isolation, following that linear process, and you launch it, and then you fall on your face. And this happens quite often, so something to watch out for. So that's where I've been very intrigued by this lean cycle for new product development, and we'll speak to that. But before that, I've got a question. Again, that's a poll. What is lean manufacturing? And hopefully we get 100% response on that, because I'm pretty sure this is a very relevant and popular topic on the industrial and manufacturing side of things. So Ahmed, if you want to bring up that poll, and let's see what the group thinks. What is lean manufacturing? So I've got some options: eliminating waste, optimizing process, reducing variation, housekeeping, improve quality. So what best defines lean manufacturing? $75% already? No?
No, 57%.
57. So we went the other way. I think our kind of product life cycle peaked and now is
Just
on
going
the
in a
decline.
sinusoidal way, it's interesting to see. Okay.
Okay.
Well, waiting for one more guy.
One more person.
Yeah, person. Perfect. So we have it.
Okay, good. Let's see what the results are. Eliminating waste, optimize process, reducing variation, housekeeping, and improve quality. So first off, all of these do have some kind of a link or relevance to lean manufacturing. But the right answer, at least I have, and I might get challenged with from Ahmed because Ahmed is the authority on this topic, is eliminating waste. I think if you look at the definition of lean, it's about eliminating waste. So you could talk about those 7 deadly waste, and that's what you're trying to do. Yes, you're trying to optimize from processes, reduce variation, 5S, housekeeping, quality, all of that. But your real guiding principle is eliminating waste. Would you agree with that, Ahmed? Or
I agree. It's the eliminating waste is the central theme of lean manufacturing. The class has yet not studied lean manufacturing. We're going to study it in a couple of weeks' time, but you're absolutely right.
okay, good. All right, so I'll kind of move forward, and so this is what it is. So we'll just kind of skip this slide because you already covered that as to what the lean manufacturing is. And let's go to what is lean. So that's a chat question. So any takers on this? I know you haven't even had the course or studied lean manufacturing yet, but anybody want to take a crack at what is lean cycle for new product development? What makes it different from the traditional new product process that we talked about just a little while back? So what would that be? Anybody on chat? I'll bring it up and see if you get any
Hello.
response. Or if you want to speak to that, please feel free to unmute.
Yeah. So I think when we are designing a product or through all the process, any process that doesn't add value to the product, and the definition of the value can be anything that customer pay for it. Anything that doesn't add value to our product, I think removing that one gonna be a lean cycle for new product design. This is just my idea.
I think you're pretty close. I think you are pretty close to what that is. Essentially, that's what you're trying to do in that new product development cycle. By using the lean principles, you're trying to reduce that waste as much as possible. And earlier on, I did talk about the high cost and high risk that you are taking with the traditional process for new product development. So that's what you're really trying to kind of eliminate. And we're going to talk about what that process looks like if you want to have that. But again, that's your guiding principle. Similar to lean manufacturing, where you're trying to reduce waste from a manufacturing process, you're trying to reduce waste or non-value add stuff from your new product development. You're trying to be really kind of lean. And I'll kind of speak to that. So there are no takers on the chat yet, so we'll move on. So I've got a short video and hopefully it's going to play okay. So I'll kind of hit play. So Ahmed, let me know if the voice does not work. We may have to skip that and we'll just kind of go into the concepts then. But let's try that. It's a couple of minutes and does a really good job in explaining what the lean new product development cycle is.
So I don't hear any sound, Etisham. I don't hear any sound. I don't hear any sound.
Don't hear any sound. Did anybody else hear the sound? Can somebody can confirm that they did not? I was hearing it, so maybe it's just kind of playing in my
No,
computer.
the students also cannot hear it.
Cannot hear it. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just kind of skip that, and I'll send out a link afterwards, and you guys can watch it. We'll be covering these concepts anyways, so I'll just kind of skip that slide. Give me a sec here. Oh, still taking us to the video. I'm trying to kind of get out of that. Okay, just give me a sec. All right. So I'll just kind of, instead of the video, you got stuck with my voice. So, okay, that's okay. So lean startup, and again, I mean, this lean new product development, as I mentioned earlier, is still a newer concept. It basically has its genesis in the tech space or technology space. There is a author called Eric Ries. Not sure if anybody has heard of his name, but he's the one who really kind of picked it up, and he wrote this book called The Lean Startup. The focus was initially on new businesses, mostly in the technology space, but these concepts can be applied on new product development, even in the traditional markets. And that's where this has kind of evolved. In fact, I mean, he's a pretty popular author now in terms of new product development, and a lot of these concepts are now being applied across the board. And it's not only him. I think those concepts have been, as the technology firms really kind of had success with those concepts, other companies had already started to kind of learn from those. But when he wrote his book, I mean, that really kind of struck chord with the industry, and it's really kind of picking up. And again, some of you may have picked up some of these concepts already, but I'll kind of go through that, and hopefully that's going to help. And again, this is one of the things which is still new. And as you kind of enter your professional careers and you kind of go into, let's say, product lifecycle management or new product development, and you'll kind of, I'm pretty sure you're going to run into those traditional processes which are linear. I think this kind of really gives you a framework that you can start challenging and kind of promoting in the organization to say, hey, this is how we should go about it in a lean way to make sure that we are able to eliminate the waste and get the most out of our new product development process at the minimum cost and to the maximum return. So there are three pillars to this lean new product development: build, measure, and learn. And it's a cycle, pretty straightforward cycle. So you kind of build, try to kind of build something from your idea. This is where MVP, a concept of MVP comes in, and we'll get into that in a bit. But you can build a product on your idea. Then you measure. I know earlier on when we started the session, somebody kind of talked about, hey, we need to have a measurement process in place in order to know how we are performing and controlling and all of that. So again, that's again a key part, that you need to have a really solid measurement process. You need to measure so that you're continuously able to see how you're performing. How is your product performing? Is it meeting the customer needs? Is it meeting the what the intent is? And then based on that, you kind of learn and you build. So it's a cycle. So you build a product, then you measure how they perform, how it is performing, what the feedback is, what are the gaps, what do you need to do different, what do you need to improve, and then you learn. And then you kind of do this cycle. And you kind of, the quicker you do it, the more quickly you learn, the better off you are, because that's how you are eliminating waste. And that's why I'll kind of get into the concept of MVP, but you are not really overbuilding your product. You are building the product that the customers really want, and you are testing it. And it's a very scientific way to go about product development, because what you're doing is that you kind of have a hypothesis, right? You build a product based on some kind of a hypothesis that, okay, you know what, the customers are looking for this feature. Okay, so let's try that. Let's build that and see if the customers take it or they like it. If they like it, yes, the hypothesis was proved. We learned from it. Let's kind of do more of it. If not, then maybe we need to do something different. So that's kind of the overall kind of process that you follow. It's pretty straightforward, but again, if you compare this with your linear approach, it's revolutionary, right? Because linear was like, you're just gonna have one step at a time, and by the time you come up with the end product, you don't even know whether it still meets the needs of the customers, and you may have sunk millions of dollars into that. Whereas in this case, you are able to learn really quickly whether you're on the right track or you need to do something different. So a few other things that I've got highlighted on this, and we'll get a little bit detailed. We talked about the MVP. When you talk about measure, we'll talk about the actionable metrics. So there need to be metrics that really kind of give you some good data that you can base your decisions on. So we'll talk about those actionable metrics. And then in terms of learning, the question that you have, do you preserve or pivot? So preserve is when you want to really maintain the status quo. If it if your hypotheses are tested, you kind of maintain and you just kind of double up on that. Or if it doesn't, then what do you need to change? So those are the decisions that you have to make. So just kind of quickly see if there is a what do you think of alpha and beta testing phase? Do they count as lean or more of reliability purpose? So I think alpha beta testing would also kind of fall into the same kind of a cycle, right? Because you are still trying to kind of learn from that. I think this So because what I find is in the real life, I mean, when you're doing alpha beta testing, I mean, this is smaller scale or towards the end when you have kind of done a lot of work already. So whereas in this case, you are continuously doing that alpha beta testing all the time. So I think I would say it's similar concept, but in this case, you are just doing it all the time instead of just doing it and at the end or at the beginning once and then you just move on. In this case, you are just doing that testing all the time. That's how I would put it. Okay, so we'll kind of move forward. So this is kind of what the process looks like. Remember, you've got this idea, you form a hypothesis, you create a minimum viable product, you test the product, and then you learn from that process. And you kind of form either another hypothesis, develop and improve the product, change the product, and you continuously learn from this. And again, in words of Eric Ries, the more quickly you learn, the better you are. And that would be your competitive advantage for the organizations who are able to have a process in place that they can quickly learn through this cycle, build, measure, and learn. I mean, those would be the successful organizations. So that's a key building block of a very powerful new product development cycle. So I already kind of gave it away a little bit, but what is MVP? What does MVP stand for? Anybody want to take a crack at it? We did have that on one of the earlier slides. Hopefully people missed that. So anyone on the chat? I'll give you a hint. It's not most valuable player. It's not that, but it's pretty close.
But it is pretty close. You're right.
So I'll just kind of go to it because there are a few responses. Most valuable product, minimum value product. Yeah, so I would say minimum value product would be close. So it's the minimum viable product. So, and it's a tough concept. And again, I have really kind of struggled with that too, because as a engineer, designer, or somebody who's kind of creating a new product, you always want to kind of have a very flashy product, right? You want to throw in a lot of features in it because you've got this concept and you want to really kind of test all of that out. Whereas the concept here is that you come up with the minimum viable. What are the key features that the customer really need? What is the base minimum that will really kind of get the product tested essentially, because you're trying to test that idea. And based on that test, you want to learn and then kind of improve or change direction. You don't want to spend too much time and effort building a product that nobody wants. So that's why the key is that what is the basic product features that you need in that product? Again, going back to the electric car example, if you were the first electric car manufacturer, do you need a really high, would you have really required something close to Tesla? No, because again, in the beginning, if you're trying to test that model, even a basic product would have done the purpose, right? Just to kind of test that model. So that's something that you need to really kind of keep in mind, which is a key part of this new product development process. So don't build your ideal product. Come up with a basic product, just good enough to test that. And the technology firms have really excelled with that. I mean, they come up with a product and then they really kind of iterate later on. So that's the minimum viable product, not most valuable player. So why do we need to measure? Anybody in the chat? What is, and again, going by maybe the person who had that comment earlier on that we need to have a measurement process to control the PLM process in general. So why do we need to measure? Why is it important?
Because I think if we don't measure, you cannot control anything. This is the first
You can
step.
control. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just kind of see because I think I've got some other chat on the chat, review and improve. Yeah. So that's how you can. So there is a very famous saying, what get measured. I won't do the poll because we're running out of time, but what get measured gets done. So if you can't measure it, you're not going to do it. You can, and again, going back to some of the other comments, you cannot control it. You cannot improve it. So I think the key is that you need to measure that. So that's why you do the measurement. But now the question becomes, what is the best way to measure? You need to have some kind of a metrics, right? But again, that's another piece where Eric Ries and this new product development, the lean cycle, has really kind of put onus on actionable metrics, not just measurable metrics. metrics, or what they call vanity metrics. So what is vanity? What does that? Maybe somebody, just look at the picture. What does that tell you? And are there any examples that anybody could give me, even on the, maybe on the chat? What are vanity metrics? It's like, it's a pretty plain guy, and he looks at him in the mirror, which is showing him to be a superhero. Relative measures. Yeah.
Things that make you look good rather than what you really are.
Yeah, rather than giving you the right picture, right? That's true. That's really true.
And we've
So
got a
what?
really good response in the chat. One of the responses there.
Oh, I missed that.
No,
True
just
value
came.
versus perceived value. Yeah, true value versus perceived value, right? What is really, because again, you can tweak the metrics and measure, so that's really important. And that's what happened in the new product development. A lot of metrics are just to kind of make you look good, right? Hey, we have got 100% growth, for example. I mean, you can start from zero. Even if you get one customer, you've got infinite growth, right? So if you're using those type of metrics, or we tested 100 customers. Okay, you tested, but what were the results? How many customers were repeat customers? How many really liked the feature? Yes, we tested our product. Okay, you tested it. If it's an electric product, electric car, how long did it last? What was the charge? All those things, right? I mean, it's really important that you have the right set of metrics. And that's where I really like the differentiation between, if you look on the left, these are the vanity metrics. So you're putting some makeup on, kind of working hard. So you're looking for metrics which are really giving you the right picture, which make you work hard. And I've got some examples here. If you're doing some total customer test or growth or surveys, so these are all vanity metrics, right? Don't really tell you the real picture, but some of the, in terms of customer usage, utility, conversion, new customers, referrals, all those are some really actionable metrics that you can really count on, right? Because they're giving you a picture as to what's really going on. Um, so it's really important. And I've got one example again from my own career. I was working with this company which came up, which is a technology company, San Francisco based, and they came up with this app, which was kind of they used to call themselves um, Airbnb of heavy equipment. So similar concept, that you can rent your heavy equipment. So construction companies, they can put their heavy equipment on this app, and people can do peer-to-peer rentals, or kind of generate that rental market. So it's a pretty neat idea, and I was part of that project, and we pushed it in Western Canada. So initially, again, we had these metrics that we were using, growth percentage and number of customers that tried it and all of that, and those numbers are very impressive, but the needle was not really moving. So it was not until we really kind of changed those metrics to, okay, how many real conversions do we, how many customers are really using this app, not just testing it or it being introduced to it, how many people, how many repeat users or customers do we have on the platform. We were not able to really judge how it was going. And honestly, at the end of the day, we realized that it was not really generating the business that we wanted. So we had to make some other decisions. So that kind of gets me into this pivot. So what is a pivot? Anybody on chat want to take a crack at it? Just going to keep an eye on the time. What is a pivot? So earlier I talked about preserve versus pivot. So again, based on the learning that you have a choice to make, whether you want to preserve that hypothesis or the feature or whatever you have done with the test, or you want to pivot. So what does pivot mean? Okay. I'll give you another hint from basketball. So there is a team. I'm a basketball fan, so a few examples from basketball. Maybe there's some basketball player in the group. Change of direction. So yeah, so just like in basketball, you do that, right? I mean, you kind of change direction. You've got this pivot, your right foot gets fixed, and you just kind of move your left. So you still got a bit of a fixed foot or leg, but you're moving the other one. So you're changing direction based on that. So that's what exactly the pivot is. And Eric Ries has done a really good job with this definition: a change in strategy without a change in vision. So you still are going the same direction. The vision is the same, but you're changing your strategy as to how you're going to get there. So again, if you are trying to kind of come up with electric vehicle and you do a test model and you come back and say, yeah, the product had these gaps, or maybe your product fell on its face. you can always learn from it. Maybe what you need to do is to kind of really extend that battery life. I think that's what the key learning is, or whatever the case may be. So again, that's where you need to be open to be pivoting. And again, coming back to the same example that I was talking about, I did indicate that in the end, we ended up doing a bit of a change in direction. So what happened was that we realized that we were not able to get as many new customers on it, but internally, the fleet managers loved that app. So all the, the Caterpillar dealers who were part of this pilot, where they were kind of pushing it to end use customers. So end use customers were not really getting on board, but their fleet managers who had their own rental fleet, they loved this app to manage their fleet because it was a good technology solution. They were able to kind of manage the service, the utilization, and all that just through an app. So that's where, this company kind of had a pivot, and they ended up focusing their app on the dealers. So they came up as a service provider for the dealers. So instead of having that as a Airbnb in the heavy equipment, they become a software for the dealers, and they ended up selling it to Caterpillar. So they did pretty good. So I know those guys, pretty young fellows from Stanford, they made some really good money out of that. But had they not made that pivot, they would have been screwed. So they have that choice, a small window where they had the option to kind of pivot in this direction, and they were really kind of focused on developing that heavy equipment rental app. But yeah, I think good on them that they realized that that was not the case, that hypothesis was not tested. So they pivoted, and we were able to come out ahead. So again, as you're kind of working on your product strategies, design strategies, and you're getting that constant feedback from your customers and the market, that's what you need to do. You need to make some decisions, and it's okay to pivot. You need to be open to that. For another example, this is on the heavy equipment side, really neat because Caterpillar also had an active strategy on electric drive. So they can introduce electric drive tractor back in 2008. Now it was too early, and it kind of fell on its feet. Nobody wanted that. It was pretty expensive. Nobody took it. Now what they did was last year they launched another tractor just as a side, because obviously, I mean, a lot of things have changed. The technology has come a long way. People are becoming more open to it. So they also launched a model along with the traditional model. And the idea was that this is just nice to have. We'll just kind of throw it out there. And what they found was that the electric model outsold the traditional model. So just kind of switched around. But the good thing was that their design and manufacturing platform was the same. So it was really easy for them to switch, because what they had done was that the electric technology sat on the same platform, same jigs, fixtures, design, everything as the tradition. The only difference was the powertrain. In fact, if you look at that, the only difference is that you have got electric wires that you can see at the back. Otherwise, both look the same. Or if you remove the housing at the back, then you'll see that there is no transmission because it's electric drive. So you'll have a big empty box. Those are the only two differences. So again, a really good example from a design perspective, that as you're designing, keep yourself open. And if you can keep that flexibility in your design and your manufacturing process, that's a plus, right? Keep that modular design or scalability in mind. From a new product development perspective, that really saves you a lot of dollars. May cost you a little bit higher upfront, but really kind of saves you huge in the long run. Ahmed, I don't know, you want to add something to that? I'm pretty sure this would be something very near and dear to your heart.
Oh, I was listening to you, and I think that a number of concepts here that you are saying apply to, you know, actually not only design of products but services as well. So we just need to be able to translate that to the current product ecosystem or the service ecosystem that we're doing. And some of the things that you've talked about, platform technology. So we've actually had some conversation about that before as well. So I think this is very relevant.
Yeah, good. And again, it's really kind of, again, there's one thing when you kind of study it, but then you kind of see it in action and how it really kind of came to the advantage of that company. I mean, it's really amazing as to those decisions can have such a high payback. But if somebody wouldn't have made that decision early on, I mean, it would have been a very different kind of direction. Somebody else could have beat them, right, with that technology, and they would have been just the followers then. Good. Okay, so time for the next breakout. So we'll kind of give 10 minutes for that. I'll just kind of read the exercise. So you are assigned as a new product development manager for a autonomous snow removal device. So winter is coming, so I thought it would be apt to kind of have a winter. If it's not already there, it's still considerably warm in where I'm at, but I'm pretty sure in Alberta it's a little bit cold. So it would be nice to have this autonomous removal device because at least I don't like shoveling snow. So you have decided to use lean cycle methodology. So you need to answer these questions. What viable features would the product have? So viable is it could be anything under the sun, right? And then what features would be in the minimum viable product? So when you're doing the viable, so just kind of expand your thinking, just kind of throw 4 or 5 different features that the product could have, and then which are the minimum that you need for the core product. Um, and then think about some metrics that you would use to really kind of test your prototype or your MVP and see how it's doing. So we'll kind of break the group into or
Yep, I
class into
am
the
going
groups.
to send them into the same breakout rooms, and
Okay,
this time around, Itisham, you should be able to, I think,
jump around.
through the step around. Yeah,
Okay, I'll
and
step around and I'll kind of check in. So 10 minutes and we'll be back. So
sure,
good luck.
sure. Okay, okay, guys, the rooms are open. So Audrey, and Parth and Moisa, you've been assigned rooms. Can you go and join those, please?
Just kind of quickly go through. So again, I would just like to kind of go through a few key points. So PLM, as we talked about, is an organization-wide process. So it's not a single entity or group. So that's one thing that you need to consider. It's a pretty expensive process, goes across all the different departments and groups. So they need to be well coordinated. And then the other one is the PLC strategy. We talked about that introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. So again, that marketing concept, you can learn a lot and gain a lot if you apply those strategies into your PLM strategies from an industrial process or manufacturing perspectives. We talked about the linear or the traditional new product development cycle, which is kind of linear, straight, a lot of waste. And that's where the lean NPD comes to your rescue, the lean new product development process, where we are really kind of using that build, measure, and learn kind of cycle to kind of really expedite that learning and reduce the waste. And then my last word is that PLM to me is akin to parenting because you are kind of managing those products from cradle to grave, and you're there, just like your kids. So you need to kind of take care of that, and you need to kind of have that end-to-end kind of scope in mind. So that's kind of the final word on PLM. So hopefully everybody had a good session and took away some good learnings that you can apply. So with that, I'll kind of end the session. I will kind of just put a link in the chat on feedback. So I would appreciate if people could fill that out. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. So I'm just going to go into chat.